Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to have you listen to a promo from one of my favorite podcasts, Suffer the Little Children.
AJ Frund, Alyssa Guernsey, Thomas Valva, Cheyanne Somerville, Noah Tomlin, Arabella Parker. What do these kids have in common? They were fundamentally failed by the very people they trusted with their lives. This is Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silenced them. I'm your host, Lane. During each weekly episode, I'll dive deep into a different case of child abuse murder, often including audio clips and conducting interviews with family members or other major players in the cases I cover. Calling attention to these tragic stories can lead to positive changes in the systems designed to protect children. These kids deserve to have their stories told and their voices heard. Subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on your favorite podcast platform.
This episode deals with the death of a child. The details are extremely disturbing and graphic. Listener discretion is advised.
County 911.
This is Zach Cohen. Need an ambulance sent out here to my apartment.
Okay, what's your address, Zach?
107 South Hilltop Avenue in Alta Vista.
Okay, what's going on?
Around 9, my girlfriend went to feed our son, and then about 11 or 11:30, she went to check on him, and he was gone.
Gone meaning?
He died.
The first responder, Toni Freidrich, arrived to the apartment of Zachary Koehn and Cheyanne Harris on the afternoon of August 30th, 2017. It was in response to a 911 call placed by Zachary. Zachary appeared calm in the 911 call, telling the dispatcher he believed that sudden infant death syndrome was a possibility. He met Toni in the front yard of the apartment and led her to where the baby was. Little Sterling's room was dark, warm, and filled with an acrid stench of urine. Zachary turned on the light and quickly went to another part of the house. Toni looked around and noted that there wasn't a crib. She did see, however, a mechanical swing facing a wall in the corner of the room. Zachary Koehn, 27, and Cheyanne Harris, 20, resided in Chickasaw County, Iowa, in the town of Alta Vista, population of about 400. They lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment with their 2-year-old daughter, Nala, and 4-month-old son, Sterling. Zachary and Cheyanne's relationship was on again, off again for 2 years. Their cycle was that they would take meth together, get clean, then start the cycle all over again. It was during one of these cycles that Cheyanne discovered she was pregnant. Sterling Daniel Koehn was born on May 1st, 2017. His arrival was unconventional, and that he was born in a bathtub while at a party at a friend's house. Cheyanne had gone into the restroom sometime that night and was surprised when she realized she was in labor. She called out for help, and the partygoers placed her in the bathtub. It is there that Cheyanne gave birth. Paramedics were called, and Cheyanne and the baby boy were transported to the hospital. Once at the hospital, their stay was short until they were moved to a bigger hospital and stayed a few days. There was concern over Sterling's health. It was thought that he may have water in his lungs. He was incubated for a day and then released to go home. The day after they returned home, Sterling went to his first doctor visit. That visit would end up being his last. Toni approached the swing that was facing the wall. In her mind, this was going to be a resuscitation situation due to the information that came in from the 911 call. What appeared before her was something entirely different. Sterling's eyes were open, devoid of the spark of life and the innocence that only babies possess. His tiny hands were clenched near his face, evidence of what his last days must have been like. The chair he sat in was wet and stained from the fluids that leaked from his body. Clothing and blankets were tucked around him in the swing, presumably to keep him from moving around in the seat. Toni reached down to try and find a brachial pulse on Sterling. His tiny arm was stiff and cold. There were flies surrounding Sterling and maggots crawling around his little body. This obviously wasn't sudden infant death syndrome. Sterling Daniel Koehn was dead. Zachary and Cheyanne were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment on October 25th. Their cash bond was set to $100,000. Neither Zachary nor Cheyanne had a serious criminal history, except a charge for theft of services on Zachary. The two were tried separately, with Zachary's first date of trial starting on October 18th and lasting until November 6th. The two trials were virtually identical, so I will cover Zachary's and mention the highlights of Cheyanne's. The following is an excerpt from the opening statements given by Assistant Iowa Attorney General Coleman McAllister.
While Sterling was alive, and those maggots were in his clothes and in his diaper, feeding on the feces in his diaper. And he laid in that room, in that diaper, between 9 and 14 days. And the evidence will show that that stool in his diaper irritated his skin, such that it ruptured the skin and his bodily fluids came out. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is going to show that Sterling died of malnutrition. He was under 7 pounds at almost 40 months of age, on the 5th percentile in the grower chart. He died of dehydration because he wasn't fed, and he didn't get water or hydration through milk, and because of his injuries. And ladies and gentlemen, he died of diaper rash. That's right, diaper rash. The evidence is going to show that that feces he sat in that diaper ate through his skin, allowing E. coli bacteria that was in his diaper and in the stools to enter his bloodstream and cause an infection. Malnutrition, dehydration, infection caused by diaper rash. That's what caused this child's death.
The defense attorney, Les Blair's opening statement was brief, less than 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, a tragedy, not a crime, is what we expect the evidence will show. My name is Les Blair, and along with my colleague, Stephen Drahosel, we represent Zachary Koehn, the defendant in this matter. I'm going to keep this short. As you already heard, this case is about the death of a child. Nothing anybody says throughout this trial is going to soften that. It's a terrible thing. The problem is, of course, that a tragedy like this creates a gut reaction in us. We want to punish them. There's an automatic tendency to what we refer to as rush to judgment. As jurors, it is your responsibility, it is your job not to do that. Now, I'm not going to talk about each individual witness and what each individual witness is going to say. I simply want to point out to you that the state gets to go first. They present their entire case. The defense doesn't get to present our evidence until after the state is done. Because of that, you need to make sure that you keep an open mind, that you listen to all the evidence, and that you don't draw any conclusions or reach any conclusions until after you've heard everything. Because there's going to be a lot here. Now, when all the evidence by both sides has been presented, Mr. Drahosel is going to get back up in front of you, and he's going to talk about the evidence. Why this is a tragedy, but not a crime. And we're going to ask you to return a verdict to the not guilty.
It seems clear that this was going to be an uphill battle for this defense team. Toni Freidrich, the first responder, struggled with her testimony. She was very affected emotionally by what she witnessed that fateful day. Skipping to day 3 of the trial, Dr. Dennis Klein, who is a pathologist, testified regarding Sterling's cause of death, the breakdown of his body due to malnutrition, and the discomfort he must have felt from hunger. During the latter part of Dr. Klein's testimony, when photos were being shown to the court, Zachary lowered his head and covered his eyes. Dr. Klein was unable to pinpoint the exact time of death, which brings us to our next witness, Dr. Timothy Huntington. Dr. Huntington is one of 15 board-certified forensic entomologists and is a forensic entomology consultant for several law enforcement agencies. He's a non-assuming looking man, but very accomplished and very impressive on the witness stand. He went into detail regarding the life cycle of a fly, as well as the habits of a fly. His testimony is rather long, as he goes into the whole process of how he came to his conclusions regarding this case. Zachary's father testified that they adopted Zachary when he was 2 and have custody of another child of Zachary's. On day 4, Zachary took the stand. The point the defense was trying to drive home to the court was that Zachary and Cheyanne were struggling for money, so much that Zachary resorted to desperate measures to buy food, household supplies, and formula. How this could have helped the defense, I'm not entirely sure. Like I stated earlier, this would be a very difficult case to defend. Closing arguments were made on November 6, 2018, and the jury came back with a guilty verdict on all charges after 2 hours of deliberation. Cheyanne Harris's trial started on January 30th, 2019. It was virtually identical to Zachary's. She did not testify on her own behalf, however. Her trial ended on February 6, 2019, with a guilty verdict on all charges as well. The jury deliberated for over 4 hours. Both Zachary and Cheyanne were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Epilogue. The city of Alta Vista held a candlelight vigil in honor of Sterling. Cheyanne is having difficulty in prison with other inmates due to the nature of her crimes. Both Zachary and Cheyanne were denied the motion for a new trial. Please subscribe, and if you have any listener suggestions, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on the Crimatorium webpage. Crimatorium is researched, written, narrated, and edited by me, Madeline.